CrisisIbility, Episode 2. As a society, we've hit a major roadblock. The question is, how are we going to navigate to overcome the crises that stand before us? 4 of us have come together to explore this. This includes myself, Alan Fine, founder and CEO of Elluette GBC, Devry Boughner Vorwerk, founder and CEO of Devry BV Sustainable Strategies, Steve Young, Global Executive Director of the Cow Roundtable for Moral Capitalism, and Michael Wright, founder and CEO of Intercepting Horizons. Welcome to crisisIbility, where we seek conversations to transcend crises with possibilities.
Good morning, Alan, Steve, and Michael. How are you all doing this morning?
Doing okay, but I wish the situation were more pleasant.
As we probably all do, right?
Right.
It's early. We get up at 7 a.m. Central to do this crisisIbility podcast, and so you know that's tough in and of itself, right? To get up and maintain the positive attitude and the notion of possibility in the middle of what we're facing and what's yet to come. I want to welcome our guests team to our second episode of crisisIbility. We had our first yesterday, which was St. Patrick's Day. We celebrate here in the United States and Ireland and other places. And we've decided to come back every day to talk about how we transcend crisis by focusing on possibility. And yesterday, and you all can kind of help me set the tone for our guests, we spent time talking about what is crisisIbility. And we talked to our guests about the notion of the ability, not the ability to manage a crisis, but the possibility within crisis. The situation is getting even more extreme, as we know. Cities around the United States and around the world are facing situations where increasing constraints are being placed. In my area of Minnetonka, Minnesota, we declared a national emergency yesterday. And in addition to all the restaurants being closed and the night before yesterday, all of our public facilities and public spaces have been closed. There's a high degree of anxiety. What we've decided to talk about this morning among the 4 of us is how do you maintain a mindset of possibility in the middle of all of this, with all of the the information coming our way, some of it very factual, others kind of in the ether, what's real, what's not. How do we maintain this mindset of possibility? Because starting tomorrow and going forward, we will be bringing in guests who are on the front lines of this reality to help us have this conversation and maintain the leadership message. So I'll start with any one of you. What's on your mind in terms of the advice that we can have for government leaders that are hopefully tuning in, business leaders, civic leaders, and just citizens in our neighborhood?
I think there's 2 things that come to mind for me. One of them is we're not going back. This is a permanent change. I think it's going to be registered fairly strong on the psyche of most people. And they're going to be looking for avoidance in the future and also probably demanding a little more out of government, our institutions, if you will, to provide leadership and guidance on how to take things forward. That's going to challenge, I think, our undercurrent of where are our values, what's important, will that shift just based on the economic realities, and do we end up applying more of a triage, if you will, to society as a whole? That would be somewhat disastrous. But on the other side of that is, all the opportunities to embrace and utilize technologies in ways we never have before, although it could be, radically inconvenient by having to have a temperature record wherever you go, not be allowed on an airplane, not with, your identification might also be your health condition. Things like that could get to be very interesting. The other part of it is are there opportunities in the network of networks? You know, that's a very interesting situation we're in. We're not just in a network, we're in multiple networks.
Hmm.
And how do those networks, you know, begin to embrace the idea of, okay, what do we do to adjust? How do we use what we have differently? So, for example, as we evolve autonomous vehicles and deliveries and things like that, does that fit better with sort of a quasi lockdown state for the delivery of food? And there's a number of things like that that I think are on the horizon that this may actually give impetus to. And again, the possibilities to how do we take what we have, adapt it like we've always done, innovate, and make it better.
Well, you know,
Your
one
thought,
really appreciate about you and spending time with you as we work together on the co-roundtable and moral capitalism is I've always viewed you as somebody who is grounded in reality, but also can help us see the future. And so I feel that that's what you've just painted for us. And I love the fact that you brought it back to the possibility in all of that, right? Because we can all scenario different outcomes of the future. But at the same time, Steve, go ahead.
So Michael, you triggered something. You talk about networks of networks. So each of us is in a number of networks via technology, via the internet and emails and other things, a lot of other things. But so I just got an email, I think probably last night. I looked at it a few minutes ago from the Center of the American Experiment, which is a conservative think tank here in Minnesota. And their email was a long list of resources for parents who now have stay-at-home kids. And it has websites you can go to get curriculum. So reading, math, science, a couple of the websites I saw are not charging any money through the end of May. But my first thought was that this could be very, very helpful to a lot of parents who have basically outsourced curriculum development to the public schools, to the schools. Now suddenly they've got 1, 2, 3 kids at home at different grade levels, and they now have to find the resources somehow to educate their children. So the resources are available. They're out there. They're on the web. They can be found through your computer. You don't have to go meet anybody to do this, but you have to have some sort of inner drive, right? Inner self-confidence to say, hey, this is cool. Let me go to this website and download, one of the things I happen to see there, like there are 2,000, I think, different reading exercises, which a parent can download and use with children.
You know, I was just going to say that something to consider is that all of us should be starting to think about ourselves in the right frame of reference. We should be looking at ourselves, in essence, I think, as parents. I have this saying, a kind heart emerges when you find within yourself the ability to be concerned with others as a good parent would be concerned about their own children. With our children, I think it's important now that they're home to keep fostering the connections that they have with their friends. Mm-hmm. We do that online, but the key thing is that this is the same thing with our economy. I think that in essence, with all of our work associates, the people that we are, we should maintain the connections of the people that we are with, and we should think about the possibilities of developing opportunity by facilitating communal connection. Especially now, it's incredibly important, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that.
Well, let me take this in a direction that will lead us to maybe some immediate possibilities here. When I hear each of you speaking, and Alan, I like what you've said about thinking of ourselves as a parent. Now, not every one of us is an active parent right now with kids home. I will tell you right now, for me, I have two small kids, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And as we discussed yesterday, I'm trying to maintain my business. And when I sit here listening to all of you, one of the challenges I would have for you is how can you become a resource for some of these other people in your community? Steve, you talk about going to a website and looking for different pieces of curriculum. You know what goes on in my head? How am I going to do that? How am I going to download all that information? How am I going to keep a schedule going with my kids? I mean, I've now been thrust into being a teacher of 2 young children while I'm trying to maintain an income and a business.
Mm.
So what if we thought of Steve as, gee, do you have a new business in you? Would you be willing to come together and have a reading hour for some families in the community and do it digitally? So how do each of us start thinking about taking the pressure off of the system, but also being put to our first best use?
Well, I think that's exactly the way we should be thinking. But for example, in our situation, so Lon and I, we're older. We've got grandkids, and we live in a condominium in Lower Town, St. Paul, where the average age here is probably, I'm guessing, I don't know, 55 maybe. There may be one or two really small kids in the building, but generally when the young couples, if they have a child within a year or so, they then move out to get their own home or something. So the issues in my building, in my immediate space, are more of older people who seem to be pretty independent and self-reliant. And I think they're more worried about what we read about older people being more subject to serious consequences if you get this particular virus. On the other hand, I walk to work, so I don't, I'm flexible. If there were someone who would approach me, or I don't even know whom I could reach out to in my environment to say, yeah, I'd be glad to read a story or tell stories or something like that, to a family or to something. Now my son, he lives in Roseville, not too far away, but he's now working from home, and his kids are older, so they're more or less they're young teenagers. They're more or less more independent, so they can fend for themselves, so to speak. You can give them things; they themselves can go on the internet and find stuff. But so that goes back to Michael's point, I guess, about how do we network with ourselves to put and the thought that has to come into my mind at this point is that traditionally is what markets and marketplaces and market towns did.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
And
how do you see yourself as a resource? Sorry to interrupt, but how do you get value in that idle time that you might feel as idle time to meet an economic or a social need at the moment in the middle of the crisis? So that's, sorry to put you on the spot, but that was where my mind was going, is how do we think of ourselves as the ultimate economic resource to address some of these social needs?
I think that business leaders now more than ever need to be in touch with their employees. They need to be listening to them. They need to be contacting them, even if it's sending group messages to let them know that, the empathy and compassion with which they show the people that they're with is going to create more cohesiveness within their businesses. I think the same thing within our communities, within our families. It's very important to maintain connections. I think there are a tremendous number of business opportunities to maintain those connections, one of which we talked about yesterday in association with your son's piano teacher. And, but, I think that it begins with, considering that what's going to hold us together is that empathy and compassion. And as a society, this is where we need to move towards. And so when we talked yesterday about social distancing, I think that, we need to be thinking about social conscience and what are the opportunities in association with that. And then during the day, there are so many things that we can do to help facilitate relationship building during this time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really, critical. Today, I'm going to be speaking to over, I think, 250 of my students. And last night I was speaking to some of my TAs, and they're all being sent home. Everybody's leaving the dormitories. They're all going home. They're all going to be separate from each other. And if in listening to them, they felt like it seemed almost like they're traumatized by this change.
Of course.
And they're afraid. One of them was saying that she's, afraid to come in close proximity to any of the other students, that she might bring something home with her, even right now. And she's planning on leaving campus later today. This is, it's a time where people can turn inward very easily. And the key thing is we need to figure out how to help people turn outward.
Right. So setting the stage for that. Michael, you tend to give us sage advice on, these sorts of things. Do you have anything to add to how we help our viewers think through what is the possibility mindset?
Yeah, I think part of it is, if you having built modeling companies, not fashion, but computer models and software models and things like that. One of the interesting things is you look for patterns, right? You develop patterns and you start to recognize what is happening someplace else that you can then take and abstract the kind of the core pieces of it, create a new pattern and use it in your application. What's interesting is if we take a look at the children of this age, if you will, the ones that have the cell phones, the things that everybody's been railing about, oh, they're overconnected, too much time on the device, etc. They're connected. They have figured out a whole social system, even languaging and symbology of how they use their hands, the way they talk and communicate with each other, what they say, what they don't say. All those interactions are there, and at a certain level, like especially high school, middle school, where they have access to technology, they're connected. They're very connected, and they stay connected. And there's there's different groups that they're connected to. So I think that's something for us to learn from in a way.
Wow.
Is just adopt that now and say. So as an example, yesterday I had a couple people that I'd never met before. I was supposed to meet. Obviously, there's no place to meet except online.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting there too, because when I connected with them on the phone, the first thing was, well, let's pick a time tomorrow so I can be in front of my desk. There's
right.
Beginning to be conscious of the context and the environment of what Zoom does and doesn't do, and or WhatsApp. In fact, that was the other conversation. Well, how about we get together on Zoom? Well, I really don't care. I have WhatsApp. I have Google Hangout. I have so it's very interesting that the resources are there. It's just can we get comfortable using them? And if you want to get comfortable, just watch what the kids do.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that, because as we were speaking yesterday in preparation for this morning's discussion, one thing that came up is there's an increase in purchase of iPads. Now, I haven't looked at the numbers, but even I purchased a podcast microphone, for example. So I wonder if also something we should be thinking about in terms of possibility mindset is where are those places and spaces in our community where we need to be thinking about very swiftly skilling people up on the technology so they can do the things that you're talking about.
Go ahead, Alan. I was just going to say 2 days ago, I sat with my 95-year-old mother, and I got her up on FaceTime, on WhatsApp, and all of a sudden she was calling up all of her kids and grandkids and so excited. And she spent the whole day yesterday doing that also, and she could see everybody because she's isolated now. And and then I ended up getting a call from my sister-in-law yesterday morning. She was saying to me, do you think, she was thinking about, gosh, I need to get this for my mother who's in a nursing home, and we can't get into the nursing home to see her. But we want to make sure that she has the ability to be able to communicate with all of us.
Yeah. Well, so Alan, you're watching our time. I imagine we're getting close to some of the final discussion.
Devry, I'd like to get back to where some of our thinking yesterday, which is one of the things we all have control of is ourselves and the way we think. Right. And I think, Alan, earlier you used the word mindset. And so my feeling is if people kind of have faith and confidence in themselves and say there are things about me that I can control. I mean, maybe this is simple, but what is it? One of the things, if you're anxious or something's going on, breathe deeply, and that physiological function of your body makes a difference.
Right.
So, what are simple analogies which give us the possibility of, number one, accepting the anxiety and the fear. Number two, sort of dealing with it. Number three, you say, I've got personal characteristics. Which reminds me, and I think we talked about this a little bit, that there are core things about each of us that we can stand on. And we had a project the other year about teaching good character for kids in public schools to grow into really, really successful adults. And it has nothing to do with money. Again, it's on the moral emotional side. So there were like four things we had in this little card we sort of gave people. One is honor. The second is truth, figuring out what the truth is. Don't be scared by this or scared by that. And then try to figure out as best you can where's the sensible ground. Responsibility, you can make a difference, and respect for others. So the little card says honor, I'm trustworthy. My kids can trust me. My friends can trust me. My coworkers can trust me. Truth matters to me. I don't want to just accept anything at face value. Responsibility, what I do matters. I can make a positive difference. And then respect for the others, being a parent, so to speak, or kids respecting their parents. Others matter too. They can make a positive difference.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
I would add to that and say that that we are all, in essence, parents. We are all children. In essence, as parents, the idea is that we all influence each other. And so regardless of what our age is, I think it's important for all of us to maintain our calm demeanor, to think about kindness and compassion, and to start listening to others, and to reach out to each other and facilitate relationships, and to think about the different dynamics. For example, there's an opportunity. We are, all in essence becoming more and more confined, but it also changes the nature of how we spend our time. We might have spent an hour commuting. Many people might have spent an hour commuting in the past. Okay, now they have that extra hour. Spend that hour reaching out to your fellow employees. Spend that extra hour reaching out to your friends, to your family, letting them know that you're here, that you care. And then thinking about how we can use that time to help facilitate the betterment of society under these conditions.
Yeah. Michael, any final thoughts before we conclude?
Well, I think there's two things. I think one of the the weaknesses in our society right now is access. We think about people, we just talked about using networks and using all of the technology. What about people that don't have access to the technology?
Yeah.
How do we innovate some way of either providing or developing ways for them to connect? The family that has one cell phone, no iPads, no computers, and that's their connection to the outside world.
Yeah.
We have lots of people in our society like that. You can't imagine people that are below the poverty line affording large-scale technology, capabilities in their home.
Yeah.
They might have one cell phone.
Yeah.
So the problem that we have there is, one of my favorite phrases is that, ignorance is accelerating, because as you leave those people behind, right, they can't have access. If they don't have access, their ability to gain information on the same time scale as everyone else goes away. They begin to fall back farther. It's like chasing a train. At some point, the train gets too far away, you can't run fast enough. So part of this, crisisIbility is, are there people out there that see this, that have ideas that they could share with us, to where we, again, take advantage of the technologies, but get it into the hands of the people that need it. It's great that we're struggling with, what do we need to access, but if they don't have access, they're struggling with a whole lot more, especially in this situation. I think it exasperates the 20% problem dramatically in terms of lifestyle and just quality of life in this kind of a situation.
So what kind of guidance can we give, just a question, what kind of guidance can we give leaders that are out there with regard to what you're saying, Mike?
I think just think about it. I think, start thinking about how you're going to improve that piece of it. Don't just stop at, oh, well, we'll be happy when we get everybody vaccinated. I think there's an opportunity here to go, well, wait a minute. A lot of this could have been headed off with the right information at the right time, with the right amount of access, again, within the network of networks. Look how fast we've learned about, what's going on in the world, because we're networked. But what about people that don't, or people that are only accessing specific networks, right? And sort of.
Let me work on some concluding thoughts so we stay true to our time frame for our guests. Which means we'll be back again tomorrow. What I'm hearing from all of you is crisisIbility, being able to find possibility in the middle of crisis is about a mindset and being really deliberate, as Steve gave us some good guidance on some different ways that we can, individually and physically try to manage our mindset. But it really is about having a mindset. And that's something that we'll push pretty heavily on this crisisIbility podcast. 2, it's about leveraging networks. 3, what I heard from you, Alan, is don't forget that some people are parents, but we're all children at the end of the day, and which means we need a caring infrastructure and a caring environment. We need to come into crisisIbility with that in play. And then the 4th thing that I'm hearing from you, Mike, technology. We have the ability to use technology through the virtual network, but we also still have a physical network that needs to be at play. And what's on my mind for you all to consider for tomorrow is this big number we're hearing overnight, that we could have 20% of the American population unemployed. And Steve can bring greater clarity to those numbers tomorrow. But there's going to be a need for the physical network to also get to some of the most vulnerable people. And we've got to think about how as we become increasingly isolated and our social distancing that's at play, how do we also still maintain meeting those physical needs for people? So I will leave some of those questions open for tomorrow. And our hope is that we will have some people who are actually innovating in the middle of this in the food space. Access to food is central, sort of in the community, the social space. And we'll just continue this conversation to help people remain engaged, networked, Mike, and to also help them with their mindset. I don't know if you see behind me, but I lit my candle on my little angel. That helps guide me through the way. So let's also first and foremost remember that we have the ability to help others with their crisisIbility mindset as well.